आपने नोट मेकिंग पे बहुत फोकस किया एंड एक्चुअली आई आल्सो फील दैट बिकॉज फॉर एन एग्जाम वेयर इन द सिलेबस इज सो डाइवर्स एंड बोथ इन विड्थ एंड डेप्थ तो उसमें रिवीजन बड़ा इंपॉर्टेंट है बिकॉज एज यू सेड दैट factual contents add power to your answers. And in order to reproduce factual contents under time pressure, you need rapid revision, and that's how we come to notes. So what was the methodology? How important is note making? Because I have met students who have cracked this examination, and I've met students who have diverse opinions. Somebody says that he made notes only for mains, no notes for prelims mein usne kitab se hi kiya. What is your take on this? What kind of note making, and for all levels were you making, or for all subjects were you making? Somebody said that he made notes only for optionals.
So I did make some notes for prelims, but for prelims my idea was like I'll read more. I'll make notes only for areas which I don't want to repeat. Like let's say I was not very favorable in terms of reading the NCERTs again and again. I started with my base books, but then I didn't want to miss out on anything that was in the NCERT. So I read it once. Whatever is important, especially 11th and 12th, and then some history books from 6 to 10. I just read it once. I made little notes on content which I don't need to read it again, so I don't have to like waste my effort again. And for some areas, like let's say in economy, some PYQ questions which are a little conceptual. Few areas I did make some notes: history, economics, polity. But most of my notes were for mains, because mains I think it is entirely predictable. Unlike prelims where you need a little more reading. Like you never know from where exactly it will come. But in mains, it's a little more predictable. So if you have solid notes for PYQ, solid notes for the areas that are specifically mentioned in syllabus, then I think any year, whichever question comes, it's always the same. Like it's almost the same, just the wording changes. Just a little bit of change in the demand of the question. You have the same notes, you can use it, tweak a little and use it accordingly. So I had specific notes for each GS. Like GS1 separate book, 2 separate, 3 separate, 4 separate, optional again separate notes. And I kept on adding, like based on current, based on revision, I try to make it simpler, add a value addition graphs. And then I had a basic framework for answer writing also, like basic structure, like the introduction, body, conclusion. In body, how do you divide it separately? Like for every area in GS, let's say if it's art and culture, like generally questions are asked from architecture or literature. So I had a frame for architecture, like if an architecture question comes in the body, how do I hit, like which all dimensions should I hit? Like it could be materials, it could be structure, it could be aesthetics. In that way for architecture, in that way for literature, in that way for history, geography, like every major area. So I had the frame prepared for every area. I had the introductions, conclusions and the frame. And then based on the question, I just had to tweak the information.
Sidharth, you also, multiple times referred and you said that current affairs is one of the pillars on which the entire preparation stands or entire preparation revolves. And there are many opinions on how should you go about preparing current affairs and the importance of current affairs preparation. Somebody says that it is not current affairs, it is contemporary affairs, because the term itself looks so wide that everything can come. So how do you actually go about preparing for current affairs, and how do you keep yourself updated? There are aspirants whom I met, they said that newspaper reading may not be a very good idea. So what is your take on all these things?
So I think current affairs is like very important, because whatever is asked, I feel something is asked only if it has some form of contemporary or future relevance. Like it's a very competitive exam, but it's also an exam that tries to find out, like pick people for public policy. So I think only if something is like relevant in terms of it's important for India's future, or in general for understanding something that is generally there in the contemporary times, only then it will be asked. So in that, from that standpoint, I think current affairs is very important. But again, newspaper or magazines, so I focus more on newspapers, but I did read compilations, because I think both serve different purposes. Like reading newspaper is very important because it helps you build the base. It helps you understand what areas were more important. Like let's say in 1 year, if you have been following the newspaper, you'll understand which areas were relatively more significant. Like which areas are more important, which areas were in the news more, which were coming in explained section, which were coming in the front page more, which is related for India's development a little more. And in the other times, like compilations are useful because there are lots of little bits and pieces of news, especially from prelims perspective, like environment, science and tech and all that, which might not be there in the headlines or in the columns as such. So you might need to read the compilations also a little. So I think a bit mix of both.